Hello and welcome to Sam-Splaining Science. I'm Sam. I'm your host. I'll be Sam-Splaining the science. And today we're talking about fiber. Fiber? I hardly know her. Sorry. I am sorry. I knew when I was writing that it wouldn't be good, but I did it anyway. And I couldn't come up with anything better. So here we are. But today we're talking about fiber. We're talking about what fiber is and how it's good for your digestion, and just a little bit of a crash course on fiber, if you will. But before we get into that, hi, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I hope your summer is off to a great start. Although technically it's not summer yet. Technically, we still have another week and a half of spring. But the weather is feeling very summer adjacent today. It hit 94, I think. And I don't know what the humidity was, but it was humid. And tragically, I had to turn off my air conditioner to record this. So I think this episode will probably be a shorter one because as much as I love to yap, you know me, I'm a gal who loves to yap, but when I can't yap with an AC on and it's 94 degrees outside, I don't have much to say, actually. Actually, thanks so much for tuning in. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Am I? Yes. No. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so for today's episode, well, before that, I hope you're doing well. I hope your summer's off to a great start. I said that all already. Okay. So for today's topic, the idea for today's topic came from someone in my life, and I'm not going to put them on the spot. I'm not going to shout them out. I asked them if they wanted to shout out, and they said no. So, but this person in my life was talking to me about some digestive issues that they were having. And they said that they saw a TikTok of somebody who mixed chia seeds in applesauce, and allegedly that helps you clear everything out. And sure enough, this person soaked some chia seeds in applesauce for 10 minutes, ate it, and their digestive issues cleared right up. By that, I mean they weren't backed up anymore. They were free as a bee. So when that happened, they were like, what the hell was that about? Why did that work? I'm like, I don't know why that worked. Let's find out, and I'll Sam-splain it to you. So that's why we're all here today. So that's what we're going to talk about. Fiber. I hardly know her, except actually I do know fiber. One thing about me, I do know fiber. Recently, I worked with, or I have been seeing a registered dietitian. And I have been more cognizant of the fiber that I eat in a day. And I have to say, some days when I track my meals, if I'm very veggie heavy, I'm getting close to 50 grams of fiber a day. And we'll get into it in a little bit. But for women, it's 25 grams recommended. But I'm killing it. I'm eating a lot of veg and a lot of fruit and a lot of chia seeds, actually. So I am a bitch that shits, which was the other working title for today's episode, but we decided against it. But yeah, we'll keep this episode short. One, because I am sweaty from my air conditioner, and two, because I'm pretty sure nobody wants to hear about shit for 45 minutes. So we're gonna keep it concise, and we're gonna head right into today's questions. Hello, are we? Yeah, we are. So we have 2 questions today. The first one is, what is fiber? Because people say, get your fiber. What the hell does that mean? Girl, I have no idea. Well, now I do, and I'm going to Sam-splain it to you. But people say fiber, and I'm like, it sounds like I should be eating cardboard, right? That's, to me, I think of cardboard. I think of sawdust when I think of fiber, and that's not really true. But we'll talk about it, what fiber is. The second question is, how does fiber promote digestion? So what about fiber makes it better to go, or, makes the digestion process move along, if you will? So those are our questions today that we'll get into. As always, my sources are linked in the description below. If you are an expert in fiber and I am not saying the right information, please tell me. I don't want to spread misinformation. That's why I leave my sources in the description so that people can fact check me. But if you're listening to this and you are a king or a queen of fiber and I'm not saying something right, please tell me. Please let me know. But you can always find sources for the episode in the description below. I don't know if you can hear the siren passing. Sorry if you can. Okay, let's move on to question number 1. What is fiber? Now, it's been a minute since I've done a Mean Girls reference on this podcast, and I saw an opportunity and I took it, because what is fiber? Is fiber a carb? Yes, fiber is a carb. Fiber is a carbohydrate. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of carbohydrates, I think of like breads or candies or more like carbohydrates that can break down into sugars like monosaccharides, glucose, that sort of thing. But not all carbohydrates can be broken down as easily as something like a chocolate or a pasta or whatever. Fiber is a carbohydrate. Usually it comes from plant sources, but it is a carbohydrate that is not broken down or absorbed in our digestive tract. And what I mean by that is that when we ingest it, we can chew it, right? We can break it down physically, but chemically, it does not break down into smaller components of the molecules that make up the fiber itself. With a caveat that most human enzymes, so enzymes are like chemicals that are in our digestive tract that break down carbohydrates and proteins and all these things that we eat into smaller pieces so that our body can use them. Our digestive enzymes can't necessarily break down fiber. However, there are bacteria in our digestive system that can break down fiber through the process of fermentation. That's a throwback to episode number 51, where we talked about fermentation and the process of making alcohol. But if you didn't listen to episode 51, I'll fill you in. Fermentation is a process that bacteria, like the ones that live in our digestive tract, can undergo to break down larger complex carbohydrates in order to make energy. And in that process of fermentation, there can be byproducts, including alcohol, which is seen when we're making beer or wine, which we talked about in episode 51. But the other, I guess, pathway of fermentation, the byproduct is, or I guess in both, one of the byproducts of fermentation is gas. So when the bacteria in our digestive system come in contact with fiber, which again is this like larger complex carbohydrate that can't be broken down into sugars or anything else at other points in our digestive tract, the bacteria will ferment on certain types of fiber in our digestive tract and create gas, which I've never experienced, but maybe some of you have. Just kidding. But yeah, that's sort of the caveat there, that mostly intact is because our human enzymes don't necessarily break down the fiber, but bacteria can, in order to create energy for the bacteria, but also it creates gas. It's the beans musical fruit, you know. You know what I'm talking about. Beans musical fruit. Fermentation in our gut. Lovely. There are a couple of different types of fiber. So you may have heard of soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So I'm going to break down what those mean. Soluble fiber is a type of fiber that dissolves in water. So soluble, like salt is soluble, like sugar is soluble. It can mix in water, and it mixes in water well. It enjoys doing so. So soluble fiber can mix with water and create a thicker gel-like consistency. When soluble fiber mixes with water and creates this gel-like consistency, it can moderate the pace of digestion. So it can slow digestion down a bit. And then some examples of soluble fiber include oats, avocados, bananas, citrus. These are all soluble fibers that when they're broken down, or rather I should say when they're physically broken down, when you're chewing them, they can mix with water and create this like gel-like consistency in the digestive tract. The second type of fiber that I'll talk about is insoluble fiber. So like soluble fiber likes to dissolve in water, insoluble fiber cannot dissolve in water. It's the opposite. But this can help move food along the intestine tract. Because it doesn't dissolve in water, it just sort of like stays as it is in like a certain structure without changing the consistency of anything. And this can promote the movement of food along our intestine. Some examples of insoluble fiber include things like whole wheat flour, beans, nuts, corn, other vegetables are insoluble fiber. The recommended dietary fiber intake per day for women is 25 grams a day. For men is 38 grams a day. This is like a recommended amount. There are days I get more than 25 grams of fiber, but I always aim for at least 25. I've been like tracking, not every day, but like once in a while, I'll track my meals. On the days that I track my meals, I usually get at least 30 grams of fiber, but there are some days where I hit like 48 grams of fiber because I'm really trying to get my fruits and veggies in. Girl, let me tell you. So fiber is good for you. We'll get into how it helps with digestion, but highly recommend getting as much as you can. But at the very least, if you're a woman, 25 grams a day. If you're a man, 38 grams a day. Anyway, is fiber a carb? Yes. And it's not easily broken down by our digestive tract, and there's soluble and insoluble forms of fiber. The soluble form mixes with the water, makes a gel-like consistency that tries to slow down the digestion a little bit. Insoluble fiber does not dissolve in water, and it kind of stays intact, and it can help move food along the digestive tract. So that's a crash course on what fiber is. But now we're going to get into a little bit more specific detail about how fiber promotes digestion in question number 2. I animated these slides today for some reason. I wish I didn't. I'm just going to stick to this. Great. Okay. So I guess maybe I should have started by saying this. When our food moves through our digestive tract, it kind of goes under different processes, right? We ingest our food, obviously through our mouths. We chew it to like physically break it down. There's some enzymes in our saliva that start to break down certain types of carbohydrates into sugars like glucose and whatnot. And then we swallow it through our esophagus, which is a tube that connects our mouth to our stomach. And then in our stomach, there's a lot of digestion that takes place. There's a lot of acid that breaks down things like proteins. There's also mechanical digestion in the stomach, where the stomach is kind of like mushing the food all together, as gross as that sounds. But then from the stomach, the food moves to the small intestine, and then it kind of goes through the small intestine until it gets to the large intestine. And then in the small intestine, the job is really to absorb the like useful materials, whether that's amino acids that are broken down from the protein that we ingest, sugars from the carbohydrates that we ingest, etc. So those are kind of absorbed through the small intestine. When we get to the large intestine, the food is called chyme. Actually, technically, I think it's called chyme once it enters the small intestine. Or maybe in the stomach. I should have fact-checked that. Whatever. At that point, when it's in the large intestine, it's called chyme. Chyme. And when it hits the large intestine, really the only thing left to do is to absorb water. So your large intestine, there's many indicators to your large intestine, depending on how hydrated you are, how much water's in your body, how much water you need to preserve, that kind of like soak up some of the water from your chyme at that point. So, and then the large intestine leads to the colon, and then the colon leads to the rectum, and then that's the end of the digestive tract. I don't think I need to tell you any more than that. So in order to explain in order to samsplain how fiber promotes digestion, my key resource here was a McRory and McEwen article that's linked below from 2017. But it kind of goes through like different situations of different types of fiber. There's way more in there than just digestion. One of them talked about how fiber impacts cholesterol. I'm not going to get into that today because that's a whole can of worms that I did not have time to do. But if you're interested, I could talk about it in a future episode. But yeah, so basically this article kind of gave a rundown of how fiber kind of contributes to digestion and sort of like the myths and the facts of fiber and the role of fiber in digestion. But then I also found a very helpful image from an article that was published in April, very recently, talking about how soluble versus insoluble fiber promotes or contributes to digestion. So we're kind of going to use both of these resources to talk about how soluble and insoluble fiber promote digestion. When we're talking about like regularity in digestion, there are a couple of different ways to classify regularity. One is frequency. So a regular frequency of digestion could be passing bowel movements once every 3 days to 3 times a day. So it's a pretty wide range. But anywhere within that range is considered regular or not a cause for concern. But if you're going more than 3 times a day or less than once every 3 days, then that's considered irregular and is something you should discuss with your doctor. Another way to classify regularity in digestion is the consistency of the stool, which I think we've all been there, where we've been sick or we've eaten something that is not agreeing with us, and the consistency is not particularly regular. So, that's another way to classify the regularity of stool. The McRory and McEwen article that is linked below, that was published in 2017. They talk about also like studies that explore stool regularity and this sort of thing. And they had mentioned that there are aspects of bowel movements that you can study in research. That includes things like the stool output measured in grams, like weighing the stool, as well as water content as a percentage of that weight. And that water content is correlated with the stool consistency. So drier stool is typically harder to pass. Stool that's more wet is usually more like a diarrhea, like flowing through you situation. So that's one thing that they note about recording the regularity of stool. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about how fiber keeps you regular. When the chyme hits the large intestine, it's mostly water. It's like 90% water. So that measurement of consistency would be mostly water. And it's the job of the large intestine to absorb water back into the body if you need it. Insoluble fiber, which is the fiber that does not dissolve in water, are typically made of larger particles that, one, the term that they use is add bulk to the stool. But another thing that insoluble fiber does is it gives stool like a coarser consistency, for lack of a better word, where if it's more coarse, it's like, I don't want to say harder per se, but it's like more rough, like scratchy almost on the surface. And because that chyme has a more textured consistency, it kind of scratches along the large intestine wall. And those abrasions, that scratching along the large intestine wall, causes a little bit of irritation, which stimulates the release of additional mucus from the large intestine wall. And then that mucus allows for, or promotes really, the movement of the stool through the large intestine. You can imagine that it's like adding slime to. The first thing that popped into my head was, what the hell are those things called? Those like the water slides, the lawn toys with the water where like you slide on them. What the hell are they called? Oh my God. Hold on. I'm sorry. I have to look this up because in my brain it's there, but not in the part of the brain that creates speech, you know? Water slide on ground. Reddit. Just kidding. What the fuck are they called? Sorry. Oh my God. I didn't mean to swear. Don't they have like a name? Or am I just making this up? Girls, I'm sorry. Brand name. Oh my God. Slip and slide. Oh my God. Okay. We got there. Girls. So the insoluble fiber, because it's scratching against the walls of the large intestine, it creates an environment similar to a slip and slide. Not in a bad way, not like it's going to shoot through, you know, but it's just enough for it to slide on along. And there's nothing wrong with that, girls. So that's what the insoluble fiber does. And that's how insoluble fiber promotes digestion, through this sort of like mechanical stimulation of mucus release in the large intestine that promotes the movement along. So the insoluble fiber will accelerate transit time through the large intestine. It promotes regularity and keeps the digestive tract healthy. So that's insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber dissolves in water, as we discussed earlier. So soluble fiber, because it dissolves in water, it creates this like jelly-like substance that, and also I noted earlier about fermentation of the fiber by bacteria in our digestive tract. Soluble fiber stays in this jelly-like consistency, which can hold water into the stool, and keeps the stool water content high, or higher, I guess. But in order to do that, it needs to resist the fermentation. It needs to stay intact so that it can keep holding the water. So fiber that is fermented earlier in the digestive tract, where it's maybe not quite fully dissolved in the water for soluble fiber, that can lose its jelly-like texture of the fiber and then lose its ability to hold on to water in the stool. So it doesn't really provide that sort of laxative benefit that soluble fiber typically can, because it does hold on to the water as it moves through the large intestine, which again, the job of the large intestine is to soak water or pull water back into the body. It's supposed to like reabsorb water to hold on to it. So when you have soluble fiber and it hasn't been fermented, it does a really good job of holding on to water in the stool, which has softer, that's the word, softer texture or consistency. I don't know what the right word is. You know what I'm trying to say. It'll be softer and easier to pass, if that makes sense. But one example here is psyllium husk, which is one that I've heard about but actually haven't tried. My registered dietitian did tell me about it, so I should try it. But psyllium husk is a soluble fiber. So it dissolves in water or holds onto water. It forms that gel-like consistency, and it's not fermented in the gut. So there was a study that was summarized in this McRory and McEwen article, linked below, where they had a randomized, double-blind clinical study that explored the laxative effects of psyllium husk compared to a marketed stool softener. So the dosing for psyllium husk was 5.1 grams twice a day. And then the dosing for the marketed stool softener was 100 milligrams twice a day. The stool softener that they used is called Docusate. But both were taken twice a day, different doses technically, 5.1 grams of psyllium husk versus 100 milligrams of the stool softener. But in a cohort of 170 patients that had been experiencing idiopathic constipation, they participated in the study for 4 weeks. 2 weeks, they had a baseline where they didn't change anything about their routine, experiencing idiopathic constipation. The other 2 weeks of the study, they had the intervention of either treatment, either the psyllium husk or the laxative. And then they compared the groups. So compared to the marketed stool softener, the psyllium husk performed better at improving stool water content, improving stool output, and improving stool frequency. So the water content, meaning that it's like the consistency, the texture of the stool. The output is the amount of stool that they passed in a given bowel movement. And the frequency is the amount of times that they passed a bowel movement. And the psyllium husk performed better than the marketed stool softener at each of those measurements. Noting, though, that the increases in stool output are greater for people who had more severe constipation than people who would be maybe healthy subjects at that same dose. So if you're not experiencing constipation, perhaps it may not be as effective or even more effective than a standard laxative, which I don't know why you would take a laxative if you weren't constipated. Maybe don't do that. But yeah, I thought that was a cool little study, a cool summary to talk about the practicality of including soluble fiber like psyllium husk into your dietary routine. So in a short summary, insoluble fiber contributes to digestion by 1, adding bulk to the stool, and 2, making the chyme in the large intestine a little rough, which stimulates the secretion of mucus from the walls of the large intestine that sort of allow the chyme to slide along the large intestine. Insoluble fiber, which dissolves in water, can hold water in the stool. So it holds onto the water, which increases the water content of the stool, which makes the stool easier to pass. This can only be done if the soluble fiber is not fermented earlier up in the digestive tract. So a non-fermentable or low fermented soluble fiber like psyllium husk can really help to increase the water content of the chyme/stool once it gets to that point. the combination of these two promote regularity when it comes to digestion. And one other thing that I wanted to mention here is that in the large intestine, I guess both intestines, but the large intestine, food is sort of propelled through sort of like contraction, like small pressure pulses as it kind of pushes through. Think of it as like a long tube. And you're trying to push something out of the tube. You got to have like little pulses that propagate it forward. How quickly the food is propagated through the large intestine is based on, not entirely, but partially based on the viscosity of the chyme or the stool, depending on where you are. So, I guess like the more viscous means like the more water content in the stool. So, well, I guess technically the lowest viscosity thing is gas. So when there's gas in your GI gut, that propagates very easily throughout your digestive tract, no problem. For liquidy stool that has like a higher liquid content in the stool, that has a slightly longer propagation time than gas, but a faster propagation time than a more formed stool, which is maybe has a little bit less, or definitely has less water content in a formed, harder stool than liquid stool. So liquid stool will move along the digestive tract in about 1 to 2 hours. And that also promotes increased frequency in addition to the increased water content in the stool. Whereas a formed stool might require a day or more to really propagate through the large intestine. So fiber doesn't necessarily change the pulsation or the pressure waves through the large intestine, but the consistency of the stool, which is dependent on the fiber, can impact how fast the stool moves through the intestine. So, getting back to the purpose of this episode, where I was asked by this person in my life, why did chia seeds and applesauce make me go? The answer is that chia seeds actually have both soluble and insoluble fiber. So it added bulk to the stool, which can increase the roughness of the stool, promote secretion of mucus that moves the stool through the large intestine from the insoluble fiber. And then the soluble fiber adds liquid content to the stool, which increases its motility time through the large intestine. Because if it's more liquidy than it is formed, that takes, an hour or two compared to a day or more. So the answer is the chia seeds, and the fiber in the chia seeds impacting the consistency of the chyme in the digestive tract, which then promoted the motility of this person's gut. And I think the applesauce just made it taste better than if you just drank chia seeds. But I've also seen people on TikTok just put chia seeds in a cup of water and drink it. To me, I'm like, ew. Like, I don't know. I'm a big texture girl. So even like the applesauce with chia seeds, I'm like, this looks kind of gross. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do, I do like an occasional chia seed. I won't lie. Sometimes I mix them in with like a yogurt or something, but I'm never like enjoying it. I'm like, I'm doing this because of my health, not because it's like making the yogurt better. But whatever. I digress. So hopefully that answers the question of how does fiber promote digestion. Depending on the fiber, it has different mechanisms, but both at the end of the day will push the food along the large intestine and eventually get it out of you, which is the ultimate goal of eating food, is eventually getting it out of you. So, and it's better to be out of you on that side. I unrelated to this topic, I hate throwing up. Oh my God. That's why I'm like, I'm happy to talk about poop all day long, because if the alternative is vomiting, we're done. Okay, we are done actually. Let's talk about the takeaways from this episode. So now we know that fiber is a carb. Is fiber a carb? Yes. But it is a carbohydrate that our bodies can't break down easily or absorb. There are two types, soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber can dissolve in water to make a jelly-like consistency, and that contributes to increasing the water content of the stool. Insoluble fiber cannot dissolve in water, and that stimulates the fluid mucus secretion that we see in the large intestine, with the rough chyme causing abrasions on the large intestine wall. And that mucus secretion can promote the passing of the stool along the large intestine. It also adds bulk to the stool, so it adds mass to the stool itself. And a reminder, recommended daily fiber intake. Let's say everyone aim for at least 35 grams. That's Sam's recommendation. What qualifications do I have? I'm certainly not a registered dietitian, but I'm saying equality, babe. Ladies, let's show these men how to eat 40 grams of fiber a day. Let's do it. Watch this. I just take a package of chia seeds to the mouth. Just kidding. Don't do that. But reminder that fiber is often found in plant-based foods. So fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, beans. Am I missing anything? I am probably missing some things. But eat your fruits and veg. Eat your nuts. Eat your beans. I love a garbanzo personally, but you can't go wrong with a black bean or a lima bean. Lentils. Oh, love a lentil. Highly recommend. But yeah, I think ultimately the fiber goals are pretty easy to hit if you have a fruit and a veg at every meal. Maybe not a fruit and a veg at every meal, but you know what I'm saying. Eat your fruits and vegetables. I have this conversation with myself every single day. Sam, you're a grown adult. Eat the spinach. So if you're not going to do it because you love the taste of fruits and vegetables, do it for your digestion. Do it for your gut. Love your large intestine and treat it with respect and give it some psyllium husk. Why not? Why not? But not too much, because again, it couldn't be a little bit too much laxative effect. If you're not backed up, that might not be so good. But moderation, babe. Good Lord, stop talking. I know. That's all. Oh, one more bullet that I already talked about. Eating a balanced diet that contains fruits and veggies, seeds, nuts, and beans. Oh, I did list everything. Look at me go. Okay. Now we're done. Now I'll shut the hell up. Girls, I'm sweating so much. Also, I've started saying girls instead of guys when I'm addressing a group of people. It's a little act of microfeminism. You should try it sometime. Okay. That really is all for this week, though. I swear I'm going to stop talking now. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please do not forget to follow, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen. And please subscribe on YouTube if you haven't yet. You can also follow the show on social media. All of the handles are at samsplainingsci. So you can connect with me on social media, ask questions if you like. My DMs are always open. You can also submit a question at samsplainingscience.com/ask. So if you want anything Sam explained to you, ask away. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Thanks for dealing with me through my heat-induced psychosis. And I hope you learned a little bit. I hope you laughed a little bit. I'm sorry I talked about poop for 40 minutes. But I love ya, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.